All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you this Monday. It's the 13th day of May. Tomorrow's election day here in Maryland. Arlen, when is election day in California?
Isn't it the same day as everywhere else?
Well, in November, but isn't there a primary? Oh, you already had your primary.
We did.
You already had your primary. That's right. We talked about that was Super Tuesday.
Yeah, Adam Schiff and was the top vote getter for senator.
And they aggregate the presidential primary along with all the other races, right? Did it used to be different? In other words, did you used to have a presidential primary on a different day or no?
I don't remember that. I think they're all together from my memory.
Well, I guess it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Are you going to even, I mean, I hate to ask it, but why bother to vote, at least for president and for U.S. Senate? I mean, it seems they're overwhelming favorites for those two races in your state.
Well, that's the problem everywhere, Helen, in most states in the country, other than the handful of swing states, as they're called. I mean, you know, it's just the way our system is, and it's not a good system.
Yeah, Arlen with us on Mondays. It's an Arlen Monday. So excited to have Arlen with us. And we'll talk about some of those swing states and the polling in them. But what I've been doing lately, Arlen, I think you know from following my program, at least to a degree. By the way, please do subscribe. You see the bell ringing. I try to center the victims of Israeli aggression as much as possible. So a rough weekend, about 150, 180 killed over the weekend. I'll be honest with you, Arlen, I was surprised the reported number, and again, of course, these numbers are reported by the Ministry of Health in Gaza. A lot of people are taking issue with their numbers, claiming that they're biased. As far as I can tell, they are deemed reliable. Of course, not going to be perfectly accurate in the fog of war. You know, there may be many deaths missing. Some are overreported. It's not always clear, but we follow them as best we can. I thought there'd be more deaths because of the Rafah invasion, Arlen, but it seems as though they just keep going up, but not jumping up, but just another 25, 30 a day, 57, I believe, yesterday reported.
Well, Hal, I got to say, whether it's, you know, a few thousand less or a few thousand more, doesn't really matter a whole lot, because Israel lost like 1,200 people on October the 7th, and they've been coming back disproportionately, and that's the problem. They've been, you know, just overdoing it, killing a lot of civilians and children, women, children. It's, and I think that's the main problem.
Well, it's also a question to be asked, is this in any way meeting the objectives, the stated objectives? Presumably, well, we know what the stated objectives have been. We've got to bring the hostages back, and we want to protect Israel from Hamas. But the opportunities to get the hostages back have been forsaken. They had a ceasefire on the table. Hamas agreed to it. It would have resulted in the return of the hostages, and Israel said no.
There's so many factors going on here. You know, what does Netanyahu want? What does the government want? What does the United States want? That, you know, they all have their own particular things they're interested in. Now, like Netanyahu is trying the best he can so he doesn't have to go to jail. So he wants to make sure that he's still in office. So, you know, whether his objectives are really for helping Israel or not, and the world, is questionable.
Arlen Grossman with us again. You can see it. He is the thought leader, or he's a thought leader. I don't know if you are the thought leader. You are a thought leader and a pundit. You post at thebigpicturereport.com. Arlen, I didn't see if you had anything new this week. I try to always keep apprised or abreast of what you're doing there, but I'm going to assume not much new because I don't remember seeing any notifications in my email. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is there something we should be looking forward to in the Big Picture Report, either now or maybe the next day or two?
Well, I've posted a couple of things. I haven't written anything lately. I've just been busy doing other things. Hey, but Hal, before we get into too serious stuff, I did want to ask you, how was your Mother's Day? How did all that go? How's your family?
Oh, that's very kind of you. So my mother-in-law came over, and of course my wife was there as well with her mother. So we had two moms in the house, and one of my sons was there. The other gave as a gift to his mother, my wife, his absence from the event. So It was just four of us, and we had a very nice meal, Chinese food, and I baked a key lime pie that my wife had selected as her preferred dessert, and it went very well. So we had a lovely time. It's nice of you to ask. How about yourself? You have two kids as well, right?
Yeah, we're unfortunately scattered all over the country. Unfortunately for Mother's Day, my wife is on the road. She hasn't quite made it to Vermont yet. She left last Saturday, and she'll be in Vermont probably tomorrow. And the kids are scattered in different places in California, so weren't able to get together in person, but we communicated, and that's the best we could do right now.
Well, I'm sorry then that you didn't get to enjoy the event in person. I wasn't able to enjoy it with my mom, but I know both my sisters were with her, so she had a nice Mother's Day as well, Arlen. And I'm proud of my sons because they both called her, their grandmother, to wish her a happy Mother's Day. So they were good boys, as they have been taught mostly by their mom. So we're pleased about
I'm sure you
that.
have something to do with it, Hal.
Very little. At least if you ask her and them, very little indeed.
I know how it is.
I want to just say we don't have a ton of time. We got a lot of really good stories, and so I'm not going to delve into those numbers, the death count. We're just going to rely on the Ministry of Health's numbers and assume they're relatively accurate, as many nonpartisan observers have concluded. I will talk about that dispute, though, later in the week, but I don't want to take up Arlen's time. Arlen, we were talking about, the goals. Is Israel getting closer to its goals? Is it achieving them? I mean, I think we all decry, we all are very, very upset by what Israel's doing to the civilians, to the women, the children, and many, of course, men as well being massacred. I believe I have used the term genocidal acts. I think it's perfectly appropriate given the scale of Israel's attacks and bombing, bombing. I was going to say they've been actually tearing up cemeteries. I don't know if you know this, but they've dug up some cemeteries and removed Palestinian graves.
For what reason?
Grave sites.
Why would they do that?
The basic theory is to kind of remove the idea that this has been a place where Palestinians lived, and this was a homeland for Palestinians. The Nazis did the same to the Jewish cemeteries, as we know, during the Holocaust. And I think it's to say, that it's kind of just disappear them as a people. That's the theory. That's the argument. And but this has been documented. I don't have the actual slides here, but that's been clearly documented. In terms of the stated war aims, if it is to eliminate Hamas, one has to wonder, why are they going into Rafah? The U.S. State Department has said the top leader of Gaza isn't even there. He's underground in Khan Yunis, perhaps, which was bombed mercilessly. The hospitals there destroyed. They found mass graves. Israel claimed that there were tunnels that it had penetrated underneath Khan Yunis. And despite all of those efforts, the leader, their top leader in Gaza, hasn't been caught and isn't in Rafah. So again, why are they doing this, Arlen?
Well, I think another big thing we really have to consider is the part of the United States. The United States has a big role in this. And Joe Biden is finally, telling Netanyahu that, hey, we're not going to support you on everything. So we're going to slow down on our arms shipments. And of course, that's another thing that got him up, in trouble with a lot of people. And a lot of people thought it was good. And, you can't satisfy everybody. You're going to have, no matter what you do, somebody's going to be upset. So, you try to do the best you can. But I'm happy to see that Biden is finally stepping up and telling Israelis, hey, you've gone too far. Let's slow down a little bit. And we're not going to help you kill a lot of people offensively, civilians and all that in Rafah.
Well, the decision to halt at least one shipment of bombs and to pause more shipments as long as this Rafah invasion is either imminent or actually ongoing. And it appears it's ongoing, although relatively slow going. As I mentioned, the death count hasn't spiked upward over the weekend, which suggests they haven't been going house to house, door to door, looking for Hamas militants, as many have feared would happen. One has to, again, looking at their stated goals, would that even achieve it? Netanyahu says this is going to continue until Hamas is eliminated. The military has basically said that's not going to happen. The death count is very high and getting higher. In part, also the military blames, and I was reading this in Haaretz, that they blame Netanyahu because he refused to accompany the invading army with any kind of supplies, any kind of humanitarian support. You look at other wars, the U.S. military, when we invaded Germany during World War II, we brought supplies. We wanted to befriend the German populace, which was victims of Nazism, just as the rest of Europe had been in many ways. And one way that we kind of won over many of the Germans was by giving them food, water, being friendly. That's the opposite of what Israel has done. And even areas that previously had been quiet in northern Gaza, where the Israeli army had been, now we're seeing Hamas militants returning, cropping back up, maybe new militants replacing some of the old ones, as the fighting is now in multiple locations in Gaza.
Well, that's the problem for Israel. It's just there's so many factors going on here that there's no way that Israel's going to win, per se. They're not going to totally destroy Hamas. They're not going to get all that they want done, because it's impossible. They're not going to get the hostages back easily. There's too many advantages that Hamas has. They can sneak into anywhere in the country that they want to. They can hide behind civilians. They've got a lot of advantages that Israel cannot overcome. And Netanyahu, if he thinks he's going to win and keep on doing what he's doing, is going to be very disappointed, I think.
Well, certainly the strategy has not only been a humanitarian crime. I mean, it's a crime against people, against a citizenry, against a group of people. It's also, again, been a failure. And there were many other ways that Israel could have responded to the attack on October 7, and it appears that they've chosen the lowest road one can imagine. Why did they do this again? I'm going to, I always try to answer my own questions, Arlen, and I've got a special surprise for you. I did tell you I was going to give you this surprise. So one of your all-time favorites, and let me make sure, I don't want to cut off your head when I transition. So I want to make sure you can all see one of your favorites, and I'm not being ironic or sarcastic or anything. There he is, Tom Hartman. I was checking up on Tom because I want to see, has he been talking about this Israel-Gaza disaster, this genocide, as I call it, by Israel, as many others as well. And I wasn't sure, is he or isn't he? Turns out he is, and I'm pleased. This was from just a few days ago, I believe, maybe in April. And let me get the video, because right now I don't have the video up for you, Arlen. So we're going to get that video. You're going to be flipping around a little bit all over the screen by the time I get this thing set up. But I want to just play this because I thought it was very interesting what Tom had to say, instructive. And I also think it could be used, Tom's analysis would make sense to be used by the Biden administration in response to the attacks by Trump, that he's too hard on Israel, right? Because Trump's kind of made the case that Israel's our ally. We should be there for Israel. We should never question what Israel's doing. Here's one reason, perhaps, why Trump is so all in for supporting Israel and the military.
So Jared Kushner has got a bright idea. He's going to solve the problem in Israel right now. All you have to do is just move those Gazans out of the Gaza Strip, and hey, that's prime Mediterranean waterfront property. And by the way, he's right. It is prime Mediterranean waterfront property, and it's worth a fortune. He's wrong, though, that moving people off their land so that you can build a Trump Tower or whatever is like some kind of good idea. It's called theft. But here's what he said. This was in an interview a couple of days ago. He said, the thing I would try to do if I was Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something I think it's pronounced Negev, N-E-G-E-V. It's the big desert, you know. And I would try to move people in there, Kushner said. I know that won't be the popular thing to do, but I think that's a better option so that you can go in and finish the job. Finish the job meaning what? Kill off all the Palestinians in Gaza or all the Gazans? That's, you know, certainly what Netanyahu has implied. He went on to say that the Gaza, quote, waterfront property is, quote, very valuable, and that Israel should remove civilians while it, quote, cleans up the Gaza Strip. Yeah. As Tommy Viter tweets, Jared Kushner's plan for Gaza, ethnic cleansing, forced dislocation of Gazans to a desert in southern Israel, continue a war that's already killed 30,000 people and build some condos. Why did the Saudis give Kushner $2 billion? Well, Donald Trump overrode intel officers by granting Kushner a security clearance despite his risk to national security. Kushner requested more classified documents than any other White House staff not working on the National Security Council.
All right, so I'll just stop it there, but obviously Hartman's just saying that the entire Trump operation was corrupt, taking bribes from foreign governments like the Saudis. That's what Kushner did, and now they're looking at, you know, depopulating Gaza and then profiting from the valuable real estate along the Mediterranean. It does seem very plausible. I mean, I don't see any reason to doubt that that's at least some of the motivation, both for Israel and also the support that maybe Trump has for this ongoing genocide, Arlen.
You know, and it just makes me so upset when I hear the word Jared Kushner, just because what he was able to take the $2 billion bribe, and here the Republicans are getting on Hunter Biden's case for, you know, much, much less. And they're investigating Hunter Biden all over the place, but nobody is investigating Jared Kushner and how he got the $2 billion.
Well, you're the one who's gone after Merrick Garland, so maybe you need to put a call into him and ask him why he didn't push that investigation as well, Arlen.
Well, yeah, I don't want to deal with Merrick Garland. He's done a terrible job. He's not serious about, you know, bringing people to justice.
We'll return to that issue of Gaza, the real estate there, and how Biden could use it, I think, effectively against Trump in the general election. But I do think it's really important to point out these conflicts of interest, because they can be not only, you know, as it would be an awful, you know, reason to support Israel as bad as any and support the wrong cause, but I think voters don't like corruption. They don't like this kind of obvious self-dealing, and they don't like it when it involves us in a war that many people find at best very distasteful. And we'll talk about that when we get to Mark Penn. I mentioned Mark Penn, a former Clinton advisor, both Clintons, former Clinton's advisor. I don't know, he worked for both Bill and Hill, winning with Bill Clinton, losing with Hillary. We'll get to that, but before we get to Mark Penn, I just want to have one other award that we put up on screen, Arlen. When you've been more supportive of, one I have been very much opposed to, this Ukraine war, and it is not going well. I just really want your thoughts where you think, what you think we should be doing in response to the facts underlying this headline here. Let me make sure people can see my face. So any thoughts? You had mentioned that you are following this. You realize that it's not looking good, right, for Ukraine right now.
Yeah, every headline I've been seeing lately has seemed very bad for Ukraine, and that upsets me. I mean, we've gone through all this thing with the weapons, and it took a long time for Congress to finally approve the weapons, and I don't know if they've had a chance yet to get there and make a difference in the war. But I've always felt, and I differ with you a little bit, in that we have to stop Putin. We have to stop Russia from, taking over Ukraine. It's just what they did was against international law. It was immoral. It was illegal. And, we know Biden is just about the worst kind of dictator. I mean, Putin is just about the worst kind of dictator there is. So, I think it's something that we have to do. And I think the rest of Europe agrees that we have to do this. And I hope there's, a way we could win.
Yeah,
Ukraine.
but Arlen, here's the thing, and I thought you were going to say something a little. Well, you sort of implied it. I mean, I don't know how much military analysts would say the reason for this recent setbacks, the setbacks that Ukraine has suffered, are because the U.S. held up aid for too long. I don't know how much that would be others would attribute this setback to. But if you read it closely, the point they also make is it's just that Ukraine is outnumbered. They just don't have the troops, and that can't be solved by more weapons. If you don't have the troops there to hold the guns and fire the weapons and shoot off the mortars, you can't win. And I understand, obviously, very high tech, modern weaponry takes the place to a significant degree of people, but they still have to be there. And Ukraine is being depopulated. I mean, they've lowered the age of conscription. They have seniors in their army. They're not required to serve, but they do have a senior unit. And now they're also looking into bringing jailbirds, convicts into the army as well. So at what point, if any, do we cut our losses and say, let's stop funding a war against Russia? Let's do everything in our power to broker a peace.
Well, your points are well taken, Hal, and I don't know how long Ukraine could go on. I think the longer it takes, the more years it takes, it's to Russia's advantage, because they're totally committed to this, and they've got all the, the weapons, troops, and everything. So it is a difficult situation for Ukraine, and of course, peace would be great. If I hope they're at least starting to preliminarily at least talk about what kind of a peace there would be, because it'd have to be fair to both sides. And Ukraine is not going to give up their whole country, I would hope. So,
well, I can I just interrupt you? I agree with that. That if Russia says, "Oh, we are going to swallow your whole country," either you surrender, without conditions, or we're just going to keep killing you and bombing you and destroying you, then I think the U.S. would have to really reevaluate its view. Putin has said flat out that he doesn't want all of Ukraine. Putin has been very clear about that. I know he wants a demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine. I know that the Russian majority, or the Russian-speaking eastern provinces, are ones he believes, Putin has said, should be incorporated into Russia, or at least be severed from Ukraine body. Crimea, Russia has occupied since 2014. I think Russia wants Crimea. I think that's what you have to sit down and discuss. I think that those are the areas where you have conversations, and because this is not working, in my opinion. And we have not pushed, from everything I've read, I could be wrong, and I know I'm chattering over you, so I'll stop. From everything I've read, the U.S. has not been committed to a peaceful process to resolve this. We have not joined with India and China that have been more forceful in advocating for a non-military solution.
Well, I agree. We should be making a good effort toward peace negotiations, because eventually that's probably what's going to have to happen. Of course, whether you can believe what Putin is saying is questionable. I mean, I'm sure he said he would never invade Ukraine, but he went ahead and did, and he as far as telling the truth and everything, I don't know that he's the most honest person you would want. So, I agree. Let's do some kind of a peace program, some kind of peace negotiation, and we should start talking about it now and working on it as the fighting goes on.
Because I think one way we are in agreement, Arlen, is we don't want to see, and we would not, I think I wouldn't, but I don't think you would deploy U.S. troops to this war zone.
No, that's never been a factor, I think. Thank goodness.
Arlen Grossman with us. We've got about 35, 40 minutes or so. So glad to be talking to you. It's always a pleasure to have Arlen on. We were saying off air, the news isn't great. Obviously, it's really terrible in the Middle East and not something we're happy about at all in Ukraine either. Again, I want peace. I don't want a stalemate, but seeing Russia overrunning Ukrainian defenses is very frightening as well, Arlen. Unlike you, I'm really not afraid. I don't worry that Russia's going to continue past Kiev or try to push into Romania. But let's face it, Putin's an autocrat. Russia is not a free country. And while Ukraine has many issues, and I'm certainly not a big fan of their corrupt petrostate either, if I had to live in one or the other, I'm sure I would ultimately choose Ukraine. So it's not ideal either way. But that's not good, right? Regardless of how you spin it, none of this is stuff we're happy about. I do want to share the polls. I don't know if you saw this, and we don't focus too much on polling here on Halitics, but every now and then stuff comes along, and you are definitely as much of a horse race follower as anyone I have on my program. So this just came out from the New York Times. I don't think these numbers would exactly excite you, Arlen, but at first blush, they may be worse than on an analysis. Have you seen the latest New York Times swing state or purple state or whatever, decisive state polling? Because Trump, at least, well, here you go. This came out yesterday. So can you see that?
Yes.
So we can go through this. I want to just say flat out, I don't think this is as bad as it looks. Michigan has come over, at least when you have the multiple candidate ballot, as opposed, I didn't put up Trump versus Biden, but Trump versus Biden, because this is the one that they're going to be, that people will vote on, right? They're going to see lots of candidates on their ballot. So I want to have the multiple candidates. This is New York Times, very reliable pollster, obviously. Michigan, Biden has, overcome a deficit. That Nevada number's got to scare you. He doesn't need Nevada, but Trump by 14, that's out of reach at this point.
Every time I see, the red numbers, it makes me very upset. And it's, and as far as all these multiple candidates, that's another interesting thing, because is Robert F. Kennedy going to hurt Biden, or is he going to hurt Trump? And right now, I think Trump is really worried, and they're attacking RFK Jr. right now. So there's so many moving parts here that it's hard to know, what's going to happen. And we still have, 6 months till the election. So, but yeah, the Biden campaign needs to campaign a lot better, because they should be way ahead with all the problems that Trump is having, but they're not. So they're doing something wrong, I think.
Well, I think that's a great point, because, a lot of the talk has been things are bad for Trump, but they're going to get worse. There's other cases coming down the road. But then again, they may not. The Georgia case seems to be kind of stuck because of the Fani Willis issue. And the Supreme Court is ruling on whether the federal cases can proceed forward. In fact, whether Trump may even be exempt from prosecution in one or, I think, both. So actually, the news could be at a nadir for Trump. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. So I don't think you can count on, the news cycle getting worse for Trump if you're a Biden supporter. That said, look, Biden is ahead in Michigan. He only needs, and I read through this article closely, because I thought Biden would need Nevada. I thought he needed Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, or he'd have to pick up the Nevada vote somewhere else. Turns out that's incorrect. I think there's some, I don't know how, shuffling of the Electoral College, what have you. Biden needs Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. He's got Michigan right now, according to this poll. Wisconsin is super tight, within the margin of error. And so is Pennsylvania. If you throw out, now Pennsylvania is a state, Arlen, where the third, fourth, and fifth party candidates hurt Biden. They actually helped Trump. And maybe, I have no idea why that is, but for whatever reason, at least in this poll, Trump is helped by having Biden, faced Kennedy, West, and Stein as well. Maybe it's the college kids in Philly and Pitt who are supportive of third-party candidates. But the point I'm making here is that Biden definitely is still well within the range of a potential win.
Well, I certainly hope so. But I think it's so upsetting and so unfair that the way these trials have been going on, that the only one that seems like it's going to have a conclusion before the election is going to be this one that the one in New York. And that's so unfair, because all these other ones are really more important. The January 6th one, all the classified documents, but for some reason, the court system is so stacked against Biden and so pro-Trump, and there's so many judges that are pro-Trump, like Cannon, and it's just not right that these cases are just not going to happen until after the election's over. There's no excuse for that.
All right, I don't 100% disagree with you, Arlen, but I don't fully agree with that either. Brianna Joy Gray said something that I thought had a lot of wisdom to it, where she would really disagree with you. And this is what she said: Democrats shouldn't rely on the court system to win, even if the cases against Trump aren't just make weight, even if they're legitimate, even if they really are based on, law breaking, which she conceded for the sake of this argument. Nevertheless, her point, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to it, is in a democracy, ultimately the public should decide who is the president, who is the ultimate leader of the country. And the public is well aware of Trump's misdeeds and, what he's done wrong. It's not like this is a secret. So shouldn't the public decide whether it believes Trump should be disqualified based on the charges that have been brought against him?
Well, I don't know how much the public really knows about the criminality of Trump, but there's so much evidence that he's done a lot of criminal things. And if people are not allowed to see that, if they're not allowed to see the convictions, to see him get some felonies, to see him go to jail, then that's going to make a big difference. And they're not going to, a lot of people just are going to ignore the fact that,
Well, I think that's the best argument. I don't really agree with that, the way you framed it, but I would frame it thus. People can still vote for Trump, even if he's convicted. I mean, presidents shouldn't be above the law, but they shouldn't be beneath it either. But the charges that Trump is facing are serious, and it's appropriate that they be brought at this time. And if even if he's found guilty, if people still want to vote for him, that's their prerogative. So I think that's a good answer. All that said, whether true or not, there's a strong appearance among many people that these trials are at least somewhat politically motivated.
Well, how are we going to know until we actually have the trials completed and we find out the verdicts? I mean, I've seen polls that say if Trump got a few felonies, that would change their vote. But he's not going to get a bunch of felonies, and I don't even know if he'll be able to get through this one in New York.
He might not get convicted in New York. It's true. Probably he will, but he might not. But the fact is, the decision not to indict Trump by Mueller didn't really change too many people's minds on the left. I mean, those who hate Trump and think he's the most dangerous person in the world, they didn't say, oh, well, look, he wasn't indicted for Russiagate, so I guess he's not really that bad a guy. So I would assume a lot of the people who support Trump aren't going to really be swayed by conviction if he is convicted.
That's another unfair thing. I think Mueller is on the level with Merrick Garland. They're both terrible.
Why can't you just say, okay, maybe the Russiagate was overblown and it was a figment of Hillary's imagination and her campaign, and there just wasn't any there?
I disagree. There was a lot that Russia was doing. They were putting a lot of effort into getting Trump elected, and the evidence is out there, and a lot of people have said that. But
a lot of people have said the opposite also.
Well, sure, Republicans will say the opposite.
No, not just Republicans. Plenty of progressives have said this was not a strong case, if there was not really any evidence to support the claim that Trump somehow colluded or conspired with Putin. And maybe, yes, Russia, maybe there was a preference for Trump because they didn't want endless war with the United States, which frankly, I don't either. So
collusion is a tricky word, but there was certainly a lot of evidence that Russia was doing all it could to get Trump elected, and I think that makes a difference.
all right, let's move on. We're not going to settle this. We haven't in years. Over the years, Arlen and I have debated that, and we have never settled it. So here's Mark Penn, the simple math that could swing the election to Biden. Forgive me, did you get a chance to peruse this, Arlen? Because I don't want to have to. I might jump to a few questions that assume knowledge, but if not, I'll have to give you a background to it. And
I saw a different article about the same subject, so I think we're on the same page.
Oh, really? Because Penn maybe it was an article about this article, because this is written by the Clinton advisor. So this is the actual story itself. By the way, if you want to join us, 240, Arlen really wants to hear from you. Forget about Hal. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. All right, let me just explain the simple math that could swing the election to Biden. And he uses the word swing ambiguously to mean swing voters, but swing the election, because what Penn points out is when a swing voter, someone who votes in every election, changes their vote from red to blue or blue to red, that is twice as important, has twice as big an impact on a race as when somebody who hadn't previously voted chooses to vote, or when someone who previously votes chooses not to vote. So the biggest bang for the buck you can get when you can convince someone to vote for you is when you convince somebody who voted for the other guy in the last election. So that's the simple math. Does that make sense? Did I explain that clearly enough?
What is the point that Penn is trying to make? What is the advantage for Biden in this story?
What Penn wants Biden to do is concentrate on bringing over Trump voters from Trump to him, and to prevent any Biden voters going to Trump. He calls those the swing voters, the centrist voters, the moderate voters, the independent voters.
Yeah, and the article that I sent you from about Penn was saying that Biden should go after the moderate vote much more than the progressive vote. That's the way he's going to get the most people and get the most advantage from.
Right. That's exactly what I just said. I said the exact same thing. So
a different way.
I think it must be the same article. Maybe they reprinted it. So, but what he starts with, what Penn starts with, and it's important, Penn is a neoliberal, Penn is a neocon. Penn was a former Republican, but he was certainly didn't feel like out of place at all in the Clinton orbit. So he has become a strong Clinton ally, which should come as no surprise to people, given their history. But he starts with his biggest concern, shall we say, is that Biden has, as you said, and as I've also, is taking on Israel, at least to a degree, isn't fully behind what Israel's doing, has held up at least one bomb shipment, has publicly scolded Netanyahu and Israel for its conduct, and Penn doesn't like that. Penn thinks that's going to cost Biden important votes.
I think Biden has to do that. He's been talking about how he, wants Israel to slow down, Netanyahu to slow down, but he's never actually done anything, no actions to prove it. But now he actually has some actions. He actually did something. So I think that'll make a difference, I hope. And you're never going to satisfy everybody. There's people on all sides of this who see things a lot differently. But I think his best bet is to at least put as much pressure as he can on Netanyahu and Israel.
So Penn makes the point that he believes that Biden felt he had to move, not that Biden really cared. No, he for Penn, it's all realpolitik. There's no morality. There's no right or wrong. The only thing that matters is getting elected. So whether Israel is genocidal or not, whether Israel is acting in self-defense or not, seems almost beside the point. What Penn is talking about is solely getting elected. And he argues that Biden believes or believed that he had to take on Israel to get back some of those uncommitted votes that he presumably lost in Michigan. Many Muslim voters, many Palestinians and Arab Americans in Michigan voted uncommitted. Biden wants those back, and Penn felt that because of that, he took on Israel. But Penn says, hey, there were 100,000 uncommitted. There were 300,000 Nikki Haley voters in the Michigan primary, and those Nikki Haley voters want you to be strong for Israel. They want a powerful defender of our ally in the Middle East. And that by supporting Israel, Biden would have a shot at getting those people.
Well, there's so many different views in so many different places, depending on what state you're in. And they're just, it's not any, but I think overall, the main thing is that Israel has gone too far. I think they need to be called out by Biden. If he doesn't call them out, then he doesn't look very strong or, presidential.
Well, what do you think of the argument, though, that there are many more Haley voters in Michigan than there are uncommitted voters? And moreover, the uncommitted voters, Penn says, have nowhere to go. You can't go to, the only way you could vote to the left of Biden would be Jill Stein or maybe Dr. Cornel West. And neither of those votes would actually be a vote for Trump. They wouldn't be a swing vote. But if Biden can get some of those 300,000 votes for Haley, he would actually be bringing votes, not only would he be getting more votes for himself, he would actually be taking votes away from Trump.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you're talking about one particular state, and there's, 49 others, although there's certainly only a few swing states. So, yeah, it is legitimate to talk about that. And definitely Biden does need some of those Haley votes. So he has to do it cleverly enough that he can get some of those.
Is it worth it? Is it worth it to say, I think what Israel is doing is wrong? I believe we have a moral imperative to try to stop what they're doing. I think we should go much further than just stop shipping weapons to them. I think we should actually send our own military into Gaza at this point, or threaten to do so, and start sending ships into the Mediterranean with our troops to protect Gazans. I think we should do that. But obviously Biden's not going to do that. But is it worth it to say, you know what, I want to win this election. Trump is an existential threat. We must beat him. And if it means we drop a few extra American bombs on Gaza, so be it.
That's the thing. The United States is at a point where we just can't send troops anywhere we want. We can't send troops anywhere, really. We have to rely on Ukraine to fight their own battle. We have to, make sure that the Gaza people are doing their own thing. And there's no way for the United States to get in there and try to use their military, because there's always the risk that we could start a World War III with Russia. And that's unacceptable, of course.
Right. But what about the argument? And so I get it. We're not going to deploy our military to protect Gaza. I get that. But what do you say to the argument that Penn might lodge? Hey, Arlen, look, I get it. You care about those Gazans. I know I'll play a little violin music for you so you can cry a tear. But ultimately, Trump is the biggest threat we face. And the only way we can be confident we're going to defeat him is if Biden moves to the right.
I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. And, there's all kinds of variations of different ways to do this, but he's got to be smart, and and this stuff is going to be eventually decided in the next few months, not tomorrow, thank goodness. So he has to really keep an eye on everything and hope that his advisors are giving him the right advice.
Well, in defense of what Penn is saying, let me put this slide up. This was from last week, but center-left Democrats break with Biden over Israel arms threat. I showed this slide last week, but basically there are Democrats who aren't happy with what Biden is doing. And I can tell you, Arlen, I know even in my own family and in my own circle, there are people who may have voted Democratic in the past, who are not Trump fans by any means, but they are leaning towards Trump right now because they feel that Biden betrayed them simply by taking, rather mild swipes at Netanyahu.
Well, there's all kinds of viewpoints on what we're doing with Netanyahu, and Jews all over the world are, have different views on, whether we're doing the right thing, or we're helping Israel or hurting Israel. And certainly Israel is losing the public relations battle in the whole world. I mean, they've lost a lot of their sympathy. A lot of people are, upset with them, attacking them, and it probably increases anti-Semitism. So there's a lot of moving parts here, Hal, and I don't have the perfect answer, but I think what Biden is doing is okay with me. I think he's moderately pushing against Netanyahu.
Well, I'm going to say right now, Arlen, I think that doing what Penn says would be wrong. You have to do the right thing at times. And even you make a calculation, you hope doing the right thing will help you. I think more often than not, if you have the courage of your convictions, if you do what you believe is truly right, not for corrupt reasons, not for self-centered reasons or selfish reasons, but because you truly believe it's right and you can defend it, I think more people will respect you more for it. And in the end, you'll put yourself in a better position going forward. Obviously, Biden's not going to have any future elections. This is the only one, and his advisors may say, "Well, we can't play around." But in the end, I think where we are, which is in a very bad place, because so often Democratic politicians have compromised, have taken money from corporations, from military suppliers, and taken advice from people like Mark Penn. Now, in this case, in this particular election, I agree that it could be proved costly, but do what they want. But sometimes you just have to do what's right. And if you don't, then what does it matter? Then why do we even care who's president?
Well, you're right, and we're totally on the same page on this. How we actually totally agree that Biden's got to do the right thing, and I think he's starting to do that. And we'll see what the results are going to be. But yeah, there is something to be said for just doing the right thing.
Arlen, Penn's prescription, I actually put this together myself because I don't like to synopsize, because I think people's words they should be held to their own words, not to what I say they say. But this is his prescription: support Israel, tough on crime, because that's what the moderate voters want, the centrist voters want, tighten up border enforcement, although he also supports some kind of Dreamers Act, and ease up on environmental regulations. That's where Penn argues Biden needs to move to capture that centrist, that all-important swing voter. Do you want to just comment on the latter three as opposed to the first, which we've addressed at some length?
Yeah, no, I think we both agree that he's got to make the case for changing the environmental laws in this country and stopping climate change. I think.
But Penn's saying do the opposite. Penn's saying, hey, let's not be pushing too much those e-vehicles, and let's not talk so much about transitioning, because it's hurting the auto industry, and the UAW doesn't like all those fleet higher and higher minimum or average fleet EPA requirements. So he's saying, no, let's make it easier to pollute, actually, or not make it harder to pollute.
Again, what's the right thing to do? As we agree, if Biden does the right thing, then he needs to, take on climate change. It's definitely has to be done. And if it doesn't, we're all going to pay the price down the line, and we're already paying the price now. Just look at the weather around the world. So, I would say he's got to work on getting the climate change bills passed as much as possible within reason. And I think he's cautious about it too. He's very careful about how he does it. He's not going 100% in all the way, but he's moving in that direction toward helping the environmental situation of this country, so we don't end up with climate change.
All right,
as
let me just stop you there because we've got some more stories. I want to respond to 4 real quick. We don't need the tough on crime and tight on border enforcement are a little less controversial, maybe. Although, well, let's just leave those for a moment. So my answer on the environmental regulations is Democrats are in a really rough spot because they have failed, in my view, A, to champion working people, and B, to present themselves as champions of working people. If they had a history, if the current Democratic Party had a history of fighting hard for working people, fighting for guaranteed health care, universal single-payer coverage for all, bringing jobs back to this country with high tariffs, protecting the right to join a union. If they had really fought for those things, they would have a little bit more leeway where they could say, yeah, we get it. The environmental regulations may make it a little tougher for your employer, but you don't have to worry about jobs being sent overseas or anything like that because we are focused on protecting American labor and American workers. And yes, environmental regulations cost a little more, but our tax policy is designed to, again, protect the working person, to protect Main Street, not Wall Street. But because they have embraced a neoliberal paradigm, I get it. Auto workers are thinking, well, we build all these gas guzzlers and the most profitable vehicles are these SUVs and minivans and the like. So, sports cars. So the Biden administration pushes too hard for these environmental regs, then we could be out of a job. And so I think that this is a failure. This is a result of a longstanding embraced by the Democrats of the polluters, the polluting class, rather than environmentalists.
Well, let's talk about right now how I think Biden's doing as well as he possibly could. He does show a stronger pro-worker stance than previous president. He's the only one that has actually been on a picket line and showed that he's pro-union. And he's trying to make the point that the rich have to pay more, and he's doing all he can to help working people more, maybe than has been done in previous administrations. But it's not going to be easy. But I think he could only go so far, but he's going, I think, as far as he can and doing it the right way, I think.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think, for example, when there was a real opportunity to perhaps leverage the railway workers' strike into some significant gains for working people, he pushed the Democratic Congress to end the strike. I think that was very unfortunate. It's not as though the railway workers wanted that strike to end. They were prepared to go a little further, and Biden stopped it. I think that was a bad mistake. So I would point that out. I also would say he didn't push for the $15 minimum wage, which was a possibility. He did not push for that. And maybe the worst of all was simply not saying the best thing we can do for working people is take the burden of healthcare costs off employers. So I'm not, I think, again, some of the things Biden's done are better than what other presidents have done, or not as bad, but it's kind of whittling around the edges. It's nibbling around the edges. It's not the kind of real substantive change we need.
Well, he can only go so far. He's up against somebody like Trump, who is just extreme, and the Republicans are just extreme on one side. But he's pushing, for things that do help workers. He's trying to, help with healthcare costs. He's trying, prescription costs. He's doing a lot of things to help working people, and he can only go so far. But I think he's at least moving in that direction, and doing a decent job. But whether it's going to end up helping him win the election, we'll see.
Appreciate your thoughts on that, Arlen. We got 2 more quick stories, which you shared with me. We're just going to kind of go through these in the next few minutes, get your thoughts on them, why you flagged them for me, Arlen. So let's start with this, the Maddow blog, written by Steve Bannon. Why do I know who Steve Bannon is? Do you know who Steve Bannon is? That name sounds so familiar.
I'm not familiar with him from before. But I do like the story. I mean, it just shows the difference between the Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are just doing crazy things that make no sense. You know, they're trying to tell everybody that Biden's trying to take away their appliances and passing legislation, you know, to make sure he can't do that. And all this time, Biden's not doing anything like that. He's just giving recommendations about, his environmental agencies are giving recommendations about what's, you know, helpful and what isn't environmentally, but he's not trying to force anybody to do anything. But the Republicans are trying to push that, you know.
So this is from Bennon's article. This was sort of the money quote. I hope people don't feel it's out of context. I don't think it is. What the bills are basically are bills that would prevent the Department of Energy or any kind of EPA from imposing energy standards on appliance makers. So you know that say you have to be efficient. You can't use more than this amount of energy to wash do a closed washing machine cycle, that kind of thing. And so GOP lawmakers have passed, are pushing bills that they're not going to pass that limit the EPA's power to regulate the way these appliances work. And according to Bennon, they want to tell their far-right base that they're fighting tooth and nail in support of pointless bills that combat energy conservation and efficiency standards. So I think there's something to that, right? There's definitely this libertarian extremist group, for want of a better word, that really, is totally against any kind of government regulation. And if you point to something that Congress is trying to do, they're going to hate it, especially if it falls on powerful, influential appliance manufacturers like Whirlpool and LG, and most of them now manufacture overseas anyway. But yeah, some people aren't going to like it. Arlen, I think what Bennon missed, though, is my next slide. Let me see if I can get it for you. And I wish he had pointed this out, because I thought Krugman and the other piece we'll get to does do this. And it doesn't belie what Bennon at the Mata blog says, but I honestly think this is real astroturfing. It's really not being driven by the base. It's being driven by the wealthy class, the elites, the appliance manufacturers themselves. They and this is from a law firm, Crowell & Mooring, that represents some of these appliance makers. So they're pushing the narrative that there's tremendous costs and expenses associated with the legislation, and we have to stop it or we'll all go out of business. And I think that's really what's going on here, is these companies know their profit margins will be minimally affected, but they're going to go whole hog and claim their very survival is at stake.
Well, that's the bottom line always, Hal, is, who's making money, who isn't, who's making profits, who isn't. But I think the good thing about the Bennon article is he's saying that the Republicans aren't really doing anything. They don't pass legislation that helps anybody. They just have negative legislation that tries to stop Biden from doing anything at all. And here's a perfect example of a law where Biden isn't doing anything, but the Republicans are kind of jumping ahead and saying, well, he might, and we can't have that happen. I think the worst thing about this was, all the Republicans voted.
Well, actually, I don't think that's correct, Arlen, what you just said. I'm sorry. I don't want to, go against you, but what I think the Republicans what they're responding to is what is in this Crowell & Mooring piece that they wrote for their website, which is actually the Department of Energy and the EPA are enforcing standards. They are going after some of these appliance manufacturers and saying your products are not as energy efficient as they need to be, so we're suing you. So we want you to go back to the drawing board and redesign them and release better products that are more energy efficient. And what the Republicans are doing is saying, no, you can't do that.
Well, Republicans are going to do whatever they can to help their base feel good about them. And, this is just one example where they're less less caring about the environment and more caring about profit and money and helping the companies that donate to them. So,
100%. I think that's exactly right. And I wish Bannon had also made that point, which, by the way, is the same point that Tom Hartman made, right? Is that a lot of what's driving the Israeli invasion is the profits that could be made by ethnic cleansing, especially clearing out populated lands along the Mediterranean Sea. So much government policy that's so harmful, so destructive, whether to the environment, to human life, is driven by profits, for short-term profits to be enjoyed by just a few people.
yeah, ultimately, that's the bottom line. Double bottom line is the bottom line is the bottom line.
So I kind of gave it away, but this was another piece that has some similarities, I think, to the appliance piece. This is from Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman from the New York Times, Meat Freedom and Ron DeSantis. You want to explain this one, Arlen?
Let me go through all my papers and find it.
All right, I'll give you a synopsis and then you tell us. There's apparently being developed in labs meat-free meat, so plant-based or laboratory fabricated food-like substance that tastes like meat. And DeSantis and some other Republican governors and legislators are pushing legislation to ban the sale of these meat-like products.
Well, but of course, the thing is, meat is available. So, what they're doing makes no sense. They're just
they don't want the products that are lab created being sold.
Yeah, that they want to essentially stop progress and make sure that their donors are happy, and that's what they're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. This is lab grown. That's the term. I had trouble with it, but Krugman uses the term lab grown meat. And he says, hey, if you want to eat lab grown meat, not that it's maybe so appealing to me, Paul Krugman, but if that's your thing, go ahead and eat it. And according to, and he says DeSantis, and he just signed a bill. It actually passed, banning the production or sale of lab-grown meat in his state, and similar legislation is under consideration elsewhere.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, that's crazy. If they could find products that will save animals from being tortured and killed, and DeSantis and those other governors are saying, oh, no, we don't want that, that should be banned. I mean, it makes no sense. There should be, meat should be available, fine, but also these other alternatives should be available too, but they're not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you, Arlen. I used to be a vegetarian. I'm no longer, but it is wrong. I mean, I just cannot justify, logically, rationally eating meat at this time. It's terrible for the environment. It's obviously worse for the animal that's killed. There's really no way to justify it except out of just selfishness.
And science has got so far in, developing, this, meatless meat that we can use that doesn't really affect animals. And, if that could be done and that helps, then it's crazy to stop it, but Republicans want to stop it.
Yeah, and Krugman makes the same point that Bannon does, which is that there's this extreme element of the Republican base that is totally against any regulations. So how come they would support them? Well, then they shouldn't support this bill, because this is a regulation saying, hey, science has to stop. We can't move forward on lab-grown meat. But if you really don't want the government involved in markets at all, then why are you saying the government gets to tell people they can't grow meat in a lab?
Another thing that Krugman says that I like is eating or claiming to eat lots of meat has become a badge of allegiance on the right. So, that's their point of view, that they want to push. This is what we believe in. We believe in meat, eating lots of meat and selling lots of guns. And, there's a certain kind of identity among those kind of people that they're trying to appeal to that, DeSantis is and the other Republican governors.
Oh yeah, they definitely tout their consumption of really bad things, like you said, purchasing guns And also drill, baby, drill, right? Remember that was the calling cry of Governor Palin when she ran as a running mate to John McCain. She, of course, from an oil-producing state.
And Trump says the same thing. Oil, get the oil. It just, he feels the same way.
Arlen, I'm done. We've gone just a little over an hour, I think, so we hit our marks. Anything you want to throw in, anything you want to promote, anything on your mind before we play the closing music?
I think what's going to be important we haven't really touched on is the trial today in which Michael Cohen is going to be testifying. And I think, that could be important. That could make or break this case and determine whether Trump will be guilty or not guilty. So this is important, as well as they have one more witness, I believe, who's going to testify. I'm not sure who it's going to be. So I just hope the prosecution knows what they're doing, because this is the only, as we mentioned, the only court case that's still around. And, it's something that I think Trump has to lose.
All right, well, we'll be keeping a close eye on the Stormy Daniels case. I'm sure we'll have more updates in a week. Who knows? Maybe it'll even be over. I don't know how many witnesses Trump is going to be calling, but they may rest after just maybe Trump will be the only one to testify. I really don't know. Arlen, it's great to have you on. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't forget, tomorrow is Election Day in Maryland. Charlie Cooper is going to be with us, and he and I will be discussing the Maryland elections.
Well, I hope those go well for your side in Maryland. And,
well, it's a primary. I don't know that it's.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. There's so much going on.
There's a couple of races I'm keeping an eye on, but none that are really jumping out on me as any candidates I really love. All right, that will do it. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, Arlen.
See you next week.